We got to ask him how he has so much success. So for that, we welcome in the head coach of the Ohio State Buckeyes, Ryan Day. Ryan Day, thank you so much for being here.
Great to be on with you guys.
Of course, this week in particular, I've heard you talk a lot about how you fight complacency within that building. You win the national championship. You're on top again as the #1 team in the country. Outside of just saying, hey, guys, don't get complacent, how do you fight that within your own building?
Well, it sounds cliche, and I think that's probably the thing that our staff and our leaders and everybody continually try to message is that we cannot get bored with the cliches, which is like focus on the process, give great effort, bring great energy to practice every day, stay focused throughout the week, throughout the day, throughout the game. Like all the things that we know are very, very important that it's easy to lose focus on because, as the season goes on, things can be distractions, or even in today's age, it's like, okay, what's the next thing or what's the flashy thing? You got to go back to the things that are your foundation of what really matters. And for us, it's really trying to, perfect our week and our preparation and focus on our preparation. Not so much our opponent. We have to know our opponent, but it has to be who we are. And so that's what we talk about on a week-to-week basis, but ultimately it comes down to whether the players buy into it or not.
Coach, I want to piggyback off of Emily's question. Not only are you fighting complacency, but with the success that your team is having, with the success that individual players, Jeremiah Smith, Caleb Downs, bona fide first-round picks, the stardom that they have, how do you get your players to fight the disease of me, selfishness, guys like Jeremiah wanting those numbers, wanting that Heisman Trophy? How do you defeat that, especially coming off already having won a national championship?
So important what you just talked about. I think that is ultimately what is going to shape the teams that are fighting for a championship at the end of the year and who aren't. Because human nature, tells you, yeah, it's about me. It's about my touches. It's about my success. And when you're part of a team, you have to sacrifice. You need each other. And you can't complete your goals if you don't have everybody together as one. And you're willing to sacrifice and you have unselfishness. So first off, we try to recruit players who, we feel like have that mindset coming in, but we also talk a lot about it. And I think, those players have seen already what it's like when you win, it's good for everybody. And the #1 goal is winning. And going back to the idea of complacency, it's like what we did last week means absolutely nothing. And it's not going to be good enough. Like how we played last week will not be good enough because every week we have to upgrade. The players and the coaches that we're going against, they watch film, they get better, and they're coming. So we have to make sure that every week we're getting better, and we understand that we have to bring it every week as well, and that's part of being consistent.
Coach, you have a football team that's loaded with talent, but I do believe you have two foundational pieces, and that will be great for years to come in Julian Sand and Bo Jackson. What's been your thought process in the way that you've brought those two young guys along?
Well, I think it's important to build confidence as the season goes. And so we had some major pieces already on both sides of the ball that we felt like we could build around. And on offense, certainly Jeremiah, Carnell, our offensive line were guys that were already in place. And so with Julian and Bo and some of the running backs, those were guys that didn't have a lot of experience. And so we wanted to slowly build their confidence so they could get better and better as time went on, knowing that that we have a really good defense and we have really good pieces around them on offense. And I think each week they're getting that more and more. And I think now that we're at the halfway point of the season, they're ready to go play now and they're ready to take off. And the team's now counting on them to do that.
Coach, when you look at your defense, man, you've been around for quite some time, but I think this might be one of the best defenses you've had in terms of points allowed. When you look at Matt Patricia and the job he's done his entire staff, what has been the most surprising element for what he's done that have paved the way for outstanding numbers from your defense thus far?
Well, I think it's easy this time of year to start making, statements, and I agree with you. They're playing very well, but you can't identify how good a defense is until the whole story's told. We're only halfway through this, so the rest of the book is still to be written, and then some. So we know that, our guys know that, and it's sort of the same thing, like ignoring the noise of when things go bad. You got to ignore the noise when people are telling you the best defense in the country. So we have to prove it every week if that's what we want to be, which is what we want to be. But to answer your question, I think the first thing is when you have pieces like Caleb Downs and Sonny Styles and Arvell Reese and Caden Curry who have been around and have played ball, they were able to build confidence with the guys that were around them. David Siddiq-Benosin played a lot of football. To bring guys like, Jalen McClain and bring guys like, Peyton Pierce and Lorenzo Styles, guys that maybe haven't played a lot of football. When you have guys next to you that have played and won national championships and are some of the better players in the country, they build confidence around them. And then you combine that with what our defensive staff is doing in terms of putting them in position to be successful. I think the chemistry's strong. So we're off to a great start, but we got to prove it every week.
Coach, I was asked this week if Ohio State had a weakness, and I said, I don't know. I don't see one. They look like one of the most complete teams in college football. But for your standard, where you want to go back to back, what do you need to improve on in the remainder of the season?
Consistency. I think that's what it is. And for our players to bring it every play, every week, and then continually get better with that. And understanding that the number one goal is to win the game. I think it's easy now, to look ahead and those types of things. Like we have to beat Wisconsin today on the road, and that's going to take our best effort, and that has to be it. And then as we go from there, it's a coach's job to make sure we're putting our players in a position to be successful. What do our guys do the best? And I feel like the best teams that I've been around have an identity, and it's like, man, they do this and this and this really, really well, and then they have compliments off of that. And now that we're halfway through the season, I think as coaches and as the team, we've been able to identify the things that we and our individual players do well. And that has to be who we are. And we have to put them in a position to be successful. And then we have to have the compliments off of that to keep our opponents, off balance. And that's it. And then, we have to be able to, play situational football when it comes up, because we know in these games, that's going to be a very important part of who wins and who loses.
Coach, it's mid-October. We've had 7 coaches already fired this season, including one who 3 weeks ago was a top 5 team and was in overtime with a chance to continue an undefeated run. And now we find James Franklin fired. What does it say about the coaching profession, the standard that's been set at a lot of schools?
Well, I think, to say that, the amount of money that we make nowadays doesn't play into it would be naive. We all know that really, plays into it. We sign great contracts and there's a lot expected on us. And so we have to perform. But at the end of the day, what we have to make sure we focus on is our people. And it's the, coaches in the building and their families, but most importantly, it's the players. And winning just allows us an opportunity to continue to have an impact on people. That's why you get into coaching. And so we can't lose focus on that. And as hard as that is, the amount of pressure that can come on all of us, it's easy to lose that type of focus, but we can't. And easier said than done, but that's, to me, what it's all about. So that when it's all said and done, sure, the wins are important, the championships are important, but again, the impact you're having on people is what the focus needs to be. And again, I say it like, if you don't win, they're going to find a new coach and you're going to lose the opportunity to have an impact on people. But that's really what the focus needs to be. So let's go get another win so we can keep this thing rolling.
Coach, real quick, I've been to a few practices and I've seen the way that you guys compete at practice. It's crazy to me, the amount of talent that you have and how hard you guys go. What's your thought process when you watch these guys go out and compete in practice? Do you sleep? You have to sleep well at night knowing that these guys are well prepared on a week-to-week basis, right?
Man, you come out for a Tuesday or a Wednesday practice, there's paint chip flying all over the field. Guys are getting into, shoving matches. It's an edgy group. I go back to spring practice. It was 2 or 3 practices. I had to put them on the side. I never had to do this before. Put them on the sideline and run them because there were too many fights in practice. And they've matured and they've grown and they realize you can't do that. But you knew you had an edgy team, a competitive team, guys who love to play. And that, to me, is very important because you're only going to fall back to the level of your training. And so when you're going against the best safety in the country or the best wide receiver across the ball from you every day in practice, going into a game you can have great confidence. And that starts with the way we practice, and that goes back to the weekly process that we have to make sure that we're mastering.
I love it. Coach Ryan Day, thank you so much for joining us today, and best of luck.
All right, guys,
Coach.
Always.